All right, my friends, after this video, you can officially be done with the scarf. We're just weaving in ends and blocking it, and then nothing left. Now that we're at the end, we have 2 ends to weave in. So thread one of your yarn tails onto a yarn needle. I did that off camera just because I really don't like this needle, honestly. It's just a little bit small. So it was a struggle for me to thread it, but now that it's there, here we are. I recommend one that's a tiny bit pointy so that it can really get into the yarn. And we're going to do 3 passes. So we're going to weave it one way, then back, then the other way, then snip it. I think that the key here is to go under whatever strand you can and then stay consistent. So you're going over, under, if you can kind of see where I'm going. So that's going to be my first pass. I did that about 4 or 5 times. Oops. And then I'm going to pull this all the way through. And then on the second one, this is where I more so on the way back try to get the end of my needle to kind of break through some of the strands of yarn so that I'm only picking up a couple of the little yarn plies. Like I'm going in the middle of the strand instead of just around a stitch, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how I do this second pass. And then I'll do the same thing on the third. So see how right here, I'm kind of going through the middle of that strand of yarn. So I'm going to keep doing that. And then once you've done that 3 times, you can cut your yarn and it should stay. If you're still a little bit uncomfortable, you could always do more. You could go up and down. You can do whatever you want. I'm just going to cut this. I'm at the other end with the other yarn tail. I am just going to show you how I thread this needle, even though it's kind of too small. So I will take the end of the tail and kind of fold it onto the needle. And then this makes the end a lot easier to work with. And then you can put this piece through the needle, which this is just on this needle where I've been kind of struggling. Ooh. Okay, I got it this time. And then we go and weave our ends. So just again, on this first one, I'm not too worried about going through the strands, but just kind of picking up some stitches or going through the strands, really whatever. I think going through the strands is key. And then we're going to pull this all the way through and then go back. And you're basically just doing this until you feel like secure enough in your work to not come undone. For me, I've gotten pretty confident with 3. It feels like this shouldn't work to me sometimes, but it always does. As long as I'm catching these threads. Again, in my opinion, that's just what I have found works. There are tons of videos on weaving in ends though. Ooh. And see, sometimes it still kind of shows a little bit. So here, I'll just kind of go back the same way and just kind of go through that yarn also to try to A, secure it, and B, hide it. So that'll make it look a tiny bit better, but this is just in the bottom corner. All right, so that made it a little bit better. And so that is our weaved in end. Like I said before too, if you wanted to, you could pick back up and do the same thing going vertically to really secure it. But that is totally up to you once you get started. So I'm going to stop there. And then when I'm cutting the yarn, I'll kind of pull it a tiny bit tighter and then cut close to my work so that when I stretch it, that little end will go back into the stitches where it was just weaved. And so now your project is really completed. Now we just have to block it. Okay, we are finally to the blocking phase. So I just wanted to make sure that you got a good look at mine before we blocked it. And there are two types of blocking, steam blocking and wet blocking. I'm gonna show you steam blocking first. It's personally my favorite. So I'm going to fold my scarf in half and just hang it up on a hanger. I went ahead and hung it up on one of my shower curtain hooks, but you can really hang it wherever works. And then I'm just gonna go through and take all my stitch markers out. You maybe already did this because we haven't needed them for a while. I've just kind of left mine because that was more of a visual, which I guess I should leave them for a visual. I'll leave a couple. Okay. I'll leave them on the other side. So you can also really tell that there's some size inconsistencies and stuff, so that will go away also. So for steam blocking, how we're gonna do this is I'm gonna use this handheld steamer that I got, I think on Amazon. Mine is Black & Decker. It was not expensive. And you basically just fill the water part, the little tank with water. And then once you plug it in, it'll turn on and you just hit the little steam button. Okay, so I have water in the little tank. It's steaming, she's plugged in, ready to go. And then I'm gonna try to show you just on one side compared to the other, but you're literally just gonna hold the steamer up to your scarf and just make sure that the steam's hitting it. So right now we're basically loosening up the fibers. It's gonna soften the yarn a little bit, especially if you used acrylic. Just kind of go at your own pace. The tassels will make it really obvious, so they're kind of stiff right now. But then once a few of them get steamed, you can stretch it out with your hands. You can kind of guide it. So you can kind of tell that those tassels now look a little bit better. I don't know if you can tell. But you can really tell even just on the side by side of this. So let me get you a better angle of that. So this side of the scarf has been steamed. You can tell that it's kind of slanting because this one's getting longer since we're loosening up the fibers in the yarn, but you can still see the texture changes. These are the regular stitches. This is back loop only. We're getting up to front loop only. And I know you can't feel through the video, but it feels nicer on this side than over here right now. So I'm just gonna keep going on that, and I'm gonna steam both sides. And both sides in every sense of the word. Both sides of the scarf, obviously, right now, I'm matching this up to here. But then also, I'm gonna lift and pull the steam through the back of it. Make sure you can see. Just to make sure you kind of get the entire stitch, every stitch to be the same. And then you'll kind of be doing the whole scarf at once, like this, because the steam can kind of get through it. But we're gonna turn the scarf and steam both sides anyway. So I just like to make sure I hit everything and that we are good to go. And you will kind of have to guide your piece a little bit, how you want it to go. This down here is still wider. So I'm going to come up while the stitches are still kind of hot and stretch them out horizontally also, because they're kind of stretching on their own vertically. So I'm trying to get the width to be consistent. So that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to flip the whole hanger so that I can do this side. And I'm gonna do the same thing. I already did a little bit, honestly, on this side of this side. This side of this half of the scarf I already did, but I forgot to record it, so I was doing it on the other side. So let me get this side of this half to match that side of this half. And I'm deciding not to cut this so that you can kind of just see how long this is going to take. And you can tell that the scarf itself is getting long. Okay, I just added more water and I'm just kind of waiting for the steam to come back. But while I'm doing that, actually, I'll go ahead and pull both sides together horizontally so that it's a little bit more even. Just kind of stretch it out until it looks like how you think it's supposed to look, basically. This is definitely not done though. Okay. This is also good to be able to see like the finished texture difference between the stitches. I really love front loop only. I mean, I knew how to do it before, but I never really like incorporated it into a project until this scarf. I really like it. Again, careful that you don't burn your fingers. I accidentally almost have like a few times. And you can hit the other side again if you want. Make sure you get the part that's on the hanger. And then once you think that you've hit it with enough steam, you can put your steamer aside. I'm gonna go ahead and unplug it so that it's not as loud, hopefully. And then while it's drying, just continue to do the stretches if you want until you love it. And I'm also gonna kind of make sure that all of these are good. Okay, I think that that is gorgeous. So then I just take it off and I just make sure that the part where it was folded kind of got the same treatment as everything else. And your scarf is blocked. So this scarf compared to one at the beginning is a little bit softer. It's a little bit more even looking. It's more drapey. I feel like I can wear it a couple of different ways now. It's not completely covering up whatever outfit I'm wearing. So this is your finished beginner scarf. And then let me show you wet blocking really quick. But I'm gonna show you wet blocking on this little square because obviously I did steam blocking on the scarf. Okay, for wet blocking, you're literally just getting your project wet. And you can also use like a pot or the whole sink or whatever. Just make sure you clean whatever surface you're using. And then don't wring it out. Just squeeze the extra water out of it until your whole project is like saturated with water. This is also the time to like clean it if you need to. So if you're using 100% wool, you can put some wool wash in there. You can put detergent. You can put fabric softener, whatever you really need to. Just make sure you rinse it all the way out. So once your project is wet, so like in our case, your whole scarf would be wet. And then once you're squeezed all of the extra out, don't squeeze it too hard because we're just gonna take a towel. And if you're doing like a bigger project, you'll have to have a bigger towel. This one is honestly too big for this tiny little square, but you'll basically just lay it down in your towel and roll the towel up so that it rolls onto the project. Press down to get more extra water out and then unroll. If your project was like soaking wet and it's huge, I would then get another towel. But then basically with your now damp piece, you lay it on the towel. Anyway, so you'll have your damp piece and your towel, and then you'll use pins, just like regular pins, or they have these blocking pins that I really like. These do really well with blocking boards, but I figured most people probably had towels, so I would just go with that. And so you start with just like one spot and pin it into the towel. And then stretch out the top a little bit and pin that in there. And then you just kind of do that on the whole thing for it to be the same size. Don't pull it too hard or you'll get like scallops in your edges, which I think will make sense in 1 second. I want to make the whole thing even. Like if I were to pull this like that and put the pins there and then pull this here and do the same thing, the edges would like go like this. So you want to kind of make sure that you're doing everything as uniform, similar, consistent as you can, and just put as many pins in wherever you think that they need to be. And so like obviously if this is a scarf, it would be really long and probably across a couple towels, but you just let this dry, and then once you unpin everything and you pick it up, it'll be whatever shape you put it in. So that is wet blocking and steam blocking. Obviously at this point you've seen steam blocking is way faster because like now we're still waiting on our wet blocking to dry. This one is cooled off, dry, and good to go already. This one gives a lot of drape, so that's when I would steam block doing clothes or anything that you want super drapey. Wet blocking is great for anything really, really big, like a blanket or something that you want to, you know, keep a certain shape. So like if this was tapestry crochet, let's say, and it had like a picture of your dog on it, you might want to wet block that and pin it before you hang it, so that when you hang it up, it's in a square and none of the edges are curling, anything like that. Whereas like a scarf, I don't need it to stay in that shape. I need it to flow a little bit. And then in my opinion, this makes it a little bit softer. The steamer that I have is great. It's not expensive, but if you kind of want to get going and you don't have that right now, if you have an iron, a lot of them have steam settings. So if you could do that, try that. If not, no worries. Just wet block until you can get a steamer. It just takes longer. And I have wet blocked sweaters and everything before, because wet blocking is typically better for natural fibers, some things like wool, sometimes cotton. Steam is really good for like acrylics, certain cotton. You can always look up the brand and see what they recommend. And stuff like that. So definitely the actual fiber itself matters. So like if I was making something in 100% wool, I wouldn't risk it with steam. I would do wet blocking and I would use a wool wash in that and make sure that I was like taking care of the yarn. So that, and then the drape. What else is different between the two? I think that's it. It's really either or. Oh, wet blocking can be difficult on things that are like 2 layers, like a sweater when you're holding it by the shoulders and then you lay it down, you know, there's like 2 layers of fabric there. That can be difficult for it to dry. So just be careful like that. Sometimes I put like a towel in between. So like towel, 1 layer of the sweater, towel inside the sweater, other layer of the sweater. It's a lot, but I just don't want it to be wet forever because then it kind of doesn't smell the best. You know what I mean? So yeah, so I would steam. You can also wet block. There's lots of different ways to do it if you are confused by me explaining it. It's also not 100% necessary or required. Like if you were happy with the scarf before, do your thing. I just think it looks so much better and it makes it look a little bit more like professional. If that makes sense. So yeah, so you've now made a scarf from start to finish. Be so proud. Okay, one thing to add that I just noticed while I was editing is that you can also do steam blocking by pinning things onto the towel or the blocking boards first and then hitting it with a steamer. So something like a blanket, I do feel like that would be helpful for, because that's really big, but it's only the 1 layer of stitches, so it could probably handle the steam. And then another thing that's really great for wet blocking is like anything with points. Like when people do really pretty like lacy doilies, those get blocked so that you can see every single like curve, every single point, every single detail. So that's kind of what I mean by holding it shape. Holding a square shape is great, but also the more intricate work does really great with wet blocking. Steam blocking, you can do that with sweaters pinned down as well, and then it's just kind of harder to get through all of the yarn all at the same time. So a lot of times blocking is just kind of like trial and error, see what works best for you, see what you like, but you can do pretty much both on anything. But for acrylic yarn, I personally 100% recommend steam. But again, whatever you're comfortable with, I would keep doing more research also to see what you're comfortable with.